There's this Christian dude with a professional demon slayer hoodie on who's interviewing a member of the KKK. In fact, he's not just a member, he is the national director, aka Imperial Wizard.
How do you discern a fake Jew from a real Jew?
Child of father of the devil, but how do I determine who's a fake Jew? Well, first off,
He believes, if I'm not mistaken, I think that he's probably going to tell us he believes people living in Israel right now are fake Jews, and that the real Jews are the Jews that remained in Israel after Nebuchadnezzar captured them. So Nebuchadnezzar captured a bunch of people from Judea, not from Israel, back in the 500s BCE, and took them and enslaved them. And it was mostly people from the tribes of Benjamin and Judah, where the people from the other 10 tribes, Reuben, Levi, and all of the others, stayed in Israel and traveled up over the Caucasus Mountains to the Great British Isles and became the Anglo-Saxons. That's oftentimes the belief. So we'll see what he says here.
Followers of the Talmudic Jewish religion would not be something that I would want to adhere to. Jewish religion, the Pharisee religion, that's what Judaism is, the religion of the Pharisees.
He's correct there. Modern day Jews are from the Pharisaical or rabbinical movement. Absolutely. Not that that's, I don't have a problem. I don't give a f. Live your life, go off. But he's trying to tie Judaism to evildoers.
You're familiar with Isaiah 14, where it talks about the satanic rebellion, where Satan says, I'm going to rise above the clouds of heaven to be like the Most High, And most people say, well, that's because he wants to be worshipped. He wants to be like God. Well, I don't think that's what he's saying. He wants to be the lawgiver. He wants to be the lawgiver and determine the law that governs our lives. And he wants to be that lawgiver. And there's this rebellion. And the rebellion we see being manifested in the Jewish religion today, and by those who we normally call ethnic Jews. They're not true Jews. In fact, Arthur Koestler...
Okay, I feel like he was asked, why do you call them fake Jews? And he didn't give us an answer at all. Why do you think they are fake Jews? What's the question? Does it need to be yelled in your face before you understand it?
Well, the 13th tribe talks about that the massive conversion of the Khazars to Judaism and to the Talmudic religion.
Dude, the 13th tribe, a book called The 13th Tribe. I've never heard of this book before, but that's very interesting.
And he said the normal person, and Arthur Koestler was a Jewish historian, he's the normal European has more Israel blood in them than the typical Jews of today.
Okay, there is no quote-unquote Israel blood because Jewish is not a race of people. They show up on ethnicity markers as Ashkenazi, Mizrahi, or Sephardic because they tend to intermarry. And given enough time, a few hundred more years, Jehovah's Witnesses will show up on ethnicity markers as well. In fact, most Mormons are probably related to each other in one way or another because they often intermarry and they've been around for 200 years. But Jewish is not a race. Ashkenazi is mostly from Europe. Sephardic, mostly from Spain and or Russia. Mizrahi from the Middle East. None of these three have any connection to each other. They have more in I have more in common with an Ashkenazi Jew than a Mizrahi Jew has in common with an Ashkenazi Jew. That's just not how any of this works. Hitler was the one that labeled it a race. It is not a race. Race is not real.
So, would you consider yourself a real Israelite?
Correct.
And what deems you a real Israelite?
Well, racially, is Israel came under 7 invasions, 4 by Assyria and 3 by Babylon, 7 different invasions. Millions of Israelites were transported out of Palestine. They went through the Caucasus Mountains into Europe.
What did I tell you? What did I say? I told you. This is fascinating to me. So the real Jews are the ones that were left behind after being captured and traveled over the Caucasus Mountains to the Great British Isles, became the Anglo-Saxons, sailed over to the United States from England. I mean, that's how the logic works. It doesn't work at all, but that's how they view things. Sailed over here from England and became the founding fathers. Seriously, that's the belief. How fucking psychotic is this. I love how absolutely insane this is. This is Shane Vaughn. He's a Trump pastor, and he said something very similar about these beliefs.
And he wrote down, he wrote a course.
Talking about George Washington.
To New Israel, New Israel, New Israel. And when they came off the ship, they didn't plant an American flag. They planted the Christian flag on the soil. They dedicated, George Washington knelt and prayed, dedicated America where the Twin Towers stand or stood. That's where America came into covenant with Yahweh, with God, was where the Twin Towers stand.
Wow.
You listen to them. Wow. It's just nonsense. The whole fucking thing is nonsense. It's all a lie.
That's something.
That is where George Washington prayed, right? There's a chapel right outside the Twin Towers where George Washington, that picture of him praying by the horse, that's where it happened.
No, that picture is not real. That did not happen, first of all. Second, St. Paul's Chapel, okay? There's a chapel out there. So?
That's where he dedicated our nation in covenant to God. If you will make us a great nation, deliver us from tyranny, then we will serve you. And he gave the nation to God at that point. Every signer of the Declaration of Independence were descendants of the tribes of Israel. We can trace it. We know it.
It's a lie. That's not true at all. Like, literally none of that is true.
And here's the thing you've got to understand about Israel. Most people think of Israel, when you say the word Israel, they think of Jews. I was a doctor of theology.
No, he wasn't. He does not have a doctorate of theology.
I was the youngest ordained evangelist in America at 14 years old.
That was Marjo Gortner at 8 years old, I think. So, no, wrong again.
Wow.
I've lived for the Lord my whole life.
No, he was an insurance salesman who defrauded a bunch of people and went to jail for 4 years for doing it.
And I was dumb as a box of rocks and didn't know it.
That one I believe.
At 40 years old, because I thought that a Jew meant Israel and an Israel meant Jew. Until I started studying my Bible, and I found out that the first mention of the word Jew in the Bible is them fighting against Israel.
Wow.
Wow. You hear them in the background? Wow.
When you come to understand that Israel is not Jews and Jews is not Israel, when you get that, here's what happens. All of a sudden, and I'll do it real fast, at one time, they were one nation. King Solomon died, King Jeroboam, King Rehoboam, there was a split.
Yep.
The Jews, the tribe of Judah, stayed in Jerusalem. They kept the Sabbath. That's why they're still identifiable. They kept the Sabbath. That kept them identifiable for these thousands of years. However, there was 10 tribes that went to the north with King Rehoboam in rebellion. Those tribes crossed over the Caucasian mountains. They were captivated by the Germans. They crossed over the Caucasian... Oh, we're out of time. Oh, anyway. So they crossed over. I'll make it real quick. Where they wound up at was the Great British Isles, because the prophecy was that they would go to the Isles of the Sea. And from there, we find those tribes making their way to the United States of America.
Dude, he's got a whistle that happens when he says his S's. Anyway, the point is, this is white nationalist / Nazi beliefs that he's been espousing this whole time. That is so fascinating to me. That's the belief. That's the whole belief system. Now this guy is repeating it.
Transported out of Palestine. They went through the Caucasus Mountains into Europe. They went through the Azores Pass, which is where Istanbul is at today. And many of them traveled by sea into the Britannic Islands. In fact, the Scottish Declaration of Independence, signed in 1320, states that they are from Israel. And the word British means covenant people. So all those Israel people were under judgment by God. They were ejected from the land because of their sin, and they were migrated into the nations of Europe and became the people of Europe.
Point is, he believes himself to be the real Jews. Romans 9, where Christians are grafted onto the tree, basically. They become like, the Gentiles can come to Jesus now, not just the Jews or whatever. That whole thing is nullified in this guy's mind because he's the real Jew. And the Jews in Israel right now are the fake ones that Jesus rejected. That is so interesting.
So how do you know you're an Israelite, like a true Israelite?
Well, I guess because...
He's got his creation myth. He's got his creation story about how he and his descendants came here from the Caucasus Mountains, from Israel. He's the real Jew. That's why. It's a belief, and it's a false belief at that.
I'm of Europe. I'm a European, and that's where Israel's set up.
So who is Israel exactly? A literal ethnic group, according to your according to your theological perspective, you believe that like Israel, that this group of people is a literal ethnic group, and you're a part of that ethnic group.
Right.
Okay, so I have some friends in Los Angeles. They're Black Hebrew Israelites.
Oh boy, those guys are nutcases. They uniquely believe that black people are the actual real Jews. God, people have so many weird obsessions with who the real Jews are, right? Like, what the fuck? They got problems, dude. The Black Hebrew Israelites, it's a cult, a full-blown cult, for sure.
Yeah.
And they would say the exact same thing, but the total opposite of you. They would say, well, we're real Israelites, and you're an Edomite.
I'm aware of that.
And they would, basically, they say the same things that you say, just from an opposite perspective, right? They say, well, Jesus came for the lost sheep of the house of Israel, and
I understand that.
things like that.
But what about the migrations and the millions of Israelites into Europe?
Well,
they say literally the exact same thing. The Black Hebrew Israelites say the exact same thing. What about the migrations of the black community through Egypt and, the Middle East and stuff? They say the exact same thing, man. Is this not, you got gummy bears in your ears? Is this not getting through or something? You're not understanding that this is a theological belief that you hold, not a factual belief?
I don't know migration of millions of blacks into Europe.
Well, I feel like, do you think that the Israelites were white?
Well, yeah, of course they were.
You think the Israelites were white?
Yes. Okay. He doesn't know. He's never heard this before. That's interesting. He's unfamiliar with this belief. The sign that you are a Jew that's been accepted by God is that you are white. And being white makes you special. And all non-whites are evil and rejected by God, basically. That's his theological belief, yes.
Adam, they're from Adam. Adam means white.
No, it means dirt. What are you talking about? Adam means white. What are you smoking, brother? Hold on. I've never heard that in my entire fucking life. I am so confused. Yes, dam means ground, blood red. This is a claim from a specific theological tradition called Christian identity, or sometimes British Israelism in its milder forms, and it's etymologically false. The actual Hebrew, the word I don't know how to pronounce, Adam, is related to Adamah, meaning ground or earth/soil. The connection is that Adam was formed from the earth in the Genesis narrative. It's deeper than most people realize. Adam and Eve kind of mean, it's kind of like saying earth and earthling a little bit. Christian identity theology, which is popular in Klan and neo-Nazi circles, especially from the mid-20th century onward, teaches that white Europeans are the true Israelites, that Jews are imposters or descendants of Satan, and that non-white people are either pre-Adamic, created before Adam, and thus soulless, or the cursed descendants of Cain or Ham. To make this work, they fabricated the Adam means white etymology. It's not supported by any mainstream Hebrew scholarship. I lost my spot. Jewish tradition or Christian biblical scholarship. It's an invention designed to retrofit white supremacy onto the Bible. That is simply false. Adam does not mean white. Never did.
How do you know that they're white?
Yeah, look at their descendants today.
Yeah, but hold on. Everyone's a descendant of Adam and Eve.
Are they?
I believe so.
Well, there's where we differ.
Because
not everyone is a descendant of Adam and Eve. So I guess he is of the persuasion that Jews existed before Adam and Eve. I've never heard that. That's very interesting. Teaches that white Europeans are the true Israelites, that Jews are imposters or descendants of Satan, and that non-white people are either pre-Adamic, which is what he believes, and thus soulless, or the cursed descendants of Cain or Ham. So he thinks they're pre-Adamic. Hold on. Let me find out more about this pre-Adamic thing. Pre-Adamism is a surprisingly long and tangled history. It's the belief that there were humans or human-like beings created before Adam, making Adam not the father of all humanity, but only the father of a specific lineage, particularly white people in this case. That is fascinating. How many views does this video have? It says 300,000 views on the January 1st. Are you fucking kidding me right now? What do the comments look like? Galatians 3:28. That one was also used in Nazi circles, and I actually addressed that verse in my book also. Right here. Galatians 3:28 in my book. The Confessing Church also referenced Galatians 3:28. Paul guided the early Christian church and explained expectations in this book. It was yet another reason for the Nazis to discard Paul as a deceptive rabbi. There's no longer Jew or Greek. There's no longer slave or free. There's no longer male and female, for all of you are one in Christ Jesus. And Paul actually in Galatians 5 laid out other rules, and all through Galatians laid out rules for what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to live. It's crazy how Jews, KKK, and Black Israelites all think they're the only people God has chosen to save. Pray for these souls. What's crazy is how closely this man's views resemble the Black Hebrew Israelites. What a twisted world he lives in. Wow, these comments are mostly negative, but this dude's offered zero pushback, basically. The switching of topics and his inability to answer any question directly was so difficult to watch. That's very interesting.
Science would say you and I, in the same way my Hebrew Israelite friends in LA, right? Even though they have a darker pigmentation, we have a lighter pigmentation, we all share 99.98% of the same mitochondrial DNA. Mitochondrial DNA comes from our mothers, right?
You realize that you almost share the same amount of DNA as a mouse?
I did not, but what kind of DNA?
Like 98% of our body structure, DNA is the same as in a mouse.
I don't think it's 98, but it's pretty close, yeah.
Because God used basic structure that all mammals are made from.
Okay. So what? I don't understand. Yes, but you're telling me that you think that Jews are pre-Adamic, so they should be very different from us, right?
That he used basic structure. So to say there's a 99% or 98%, I covered in my book, The Last Church, which I think you've been reading, And so I don't know.
Dude, I need to get this book. Thomas Robb. Yep, found it. The Last Church by Thomas Robb. Reverend Thomas A. Robb. Let me see if I can find a copy to legally download. Legally. I only do things legal. All legal. My illegal sources are down anyway, apparently, so I couldn't do it illegally, even if I wanted, unfortunately. I mean, fortunately, because I don't do things illegally. Only legal-like. Hold on. All legal.
Sexist shit! And no, I don't have to talk to you politely. You sexist shit! In Jasper County, motherfuckers, I'm coming for you. You motherfuckers, I'm coming for you. Yeah. All legal-like. Yeah, legal. We'll do it on your terms, motherfuckers. Our government needs stopped. Stopped.
All legal. I only ever find books all legal-like. Legal.
Over the figures, but the percentage of...
She'll be in my nightmares. Yeah, sorry. She's so disturbing, right? Legal. I can't find my book illegally or legally, unfortunately. I'm really disappointed by that. Let me look on Audible. I'm curious if it's on there. The Last Church. No, it's not on there. By Graham McNeil is on here, but that's sci-fi apparently. You can get it on eBay and Amazon apparently. You can get it on Amazon as a paperback. Great. How many? It's 55 pages. It's very short. He's got 1 rating. Damn. Outstanding read. Honestly, not what... I'm sorry. And honestly, on what is happening to Christianity. Truth, I bet.
Difference between, say, you and a black man from Africa being just like 1 or 2 tiny percent. That same amount, just slightly different, is between you and a mouse. We have almost the same body structure. But there's a big difference between you and a mouse.
Yeah, but there's a big difference because the mouse isn't made in the image of God. Jesus makes that distinction in Matthew chapter 6. The animals of the air.
You're making an assumption that all races came from Adam.
Well,
you're making an assumption there.
Okay, let me ask another question.
All right.
Do you believe that black people are made in the image of God?
No.
Do you believe that?
And it depends what you mean by the image of God. But
that's wild, dude. That is wild. Oh my God. What a fucking psychotic thing to say. I've never heard this pre-Adamic thing. This, what's it called? Pre-Adamism. I've never heard of pre-Adamism before. This is new to me.
No, they're certainly not made in the spirit of God. When you say the image of God, what does that mean?
So at the beginning of this, he said, let's talk about the church and the clan separately. He said they're two separate entities. And in fact, the people in this church aren't necessarily members of the KKK. That's what he said. But he's a reverend here, as far as I can tell. How do you preach to this church without bringing up, I mean, the religious ideas are all intertwined into this whole, like, ideological belief. How could you possibly not talk about them both? Just a reminder, I would really appreciate it if you guys checked out my Patreon. If you're not going to donate, you don't have to, but follow me there at the very least. owenmorgan.com/Patreon. Just in case something happens with the government or whatever. It would be really good if you had some way to connect with me and my content. I'm really concerned about that. And maybe you should consider that for other creators too.
The image of God, it would look like you, look like me, look like him, look like him. I mean, so there's differences in the image of God. So God created Adam in the image of God. Okay. And from there, the fact the Bible opens up, this is the book of the generations of Adam. And God gives a genealogy of the Adamic people. Okay. And, but you're assuming, because I guess you're importing a little bit of evolution in there, you're assuming that black people came out of that same thing. And
that's fascinating, dude. Oh my God. His viewpoint on this is so fucking wild. Seriously. 2327. We'll jump back to this in 1 second. I just want to grab this last marker. Right. I think right here.
God gives a genealogy of the image of God. But no, they're certainly not made in the spirit of God. But different people came out of that same tree that somehow evolution kind of made those little selections, and so all these people come. In fact, Ken Ham.
Sorry. Yeah, I slowed it down too much. Sorry about that.
In his book, One People Come. In fact, Ken Ham, his name? In his book, One Blood, he talks about the same thing. He said, well, some people became black because they were in the sun and so forth. They ate different kinds of food and different kinds of vegetation, and so various parts of their pigmentation died, and so that's why they're
Ken Ham says this in his book? Like the white nationalist stuff? I'm suspicious. I never knew Ken Ham to be a white nationalist. Or a Nazi. I thought he was just like a right-wing nutcase.
Black and white people, they had a different diet, so they kind of the white race developed and so on. You've probably read this stuff. And so that's evolution. I totally disqualify evolution.
That is fascinating. So the KKK leader is saying the claim that we all came from Adam is evolution and should be discarded.
In Scripture, and yet so often the only way they can is to say, well, somehow God created Adam, and all these other races came out of that.
So Paul, the apostle, he writes in one of his epistles, "I've become all things for all people, so I might win some to the Lord." And we have in the Scriptures talking about the difference between Jews and a Gentile. Now, I've heard you say that you don't believe that Gentile means non-Jew.
It means nations, from the word ethnos in the Hebrew.
I don't believe literally anything that this dude says, so let's see if we can find out. What does the word Gentile originally mean? See if we can find some info on this one. Okay, here. It's an English word, comes from Latin gentilis, meaning of or belonging to a clan or tribe, derived from gens, clan, tribe, people, nation. It was used in the Latin Vulgate Bible to translate the Hebrew and Greek terms. And I'm just reading here. Here's the Greek. In the New Testament, the equivalent is ethnos, plural ethna, again, just meaning nation or people. It's the root of our word ethnic. The Septuagint, the Greek Old Testament, used ethnos to translate goy. Gentile in the Hebrew Bible is goy, or plural goyim. It simply means nation or people. Notably, it's applied to Israel itself in several passages. God tells Abraham he'll make him a great goy, and Israel is called a goy kadosh, or a holy nation. So goy, goyim, is not a negative term in the Bible. It means nation or people or ethnicity. That's it. Here's what Christian identity does with it. He's probably arguing one of these three things: that Gentile originally meant white nations specifically, that the word proves separate racial origins, or that some connection to gens or genetics to imply racial, or that there's some connection to gens or genetics to imply racial lineage. None of that holds up. It's all lies. Okay, so step back, listen to how he says Gentile again. It basically just means nation. That's it. And is even used to refer to Jews in the Old Testament.
We have in the scriptures talking about the difference between Jews and a Gentile. Now, I've heard you say that you don't believe that Gentile means non-Jew.
It means nations, from the word ethnos in the Hebrew.
So you don't believe that Gentile means non-Jew?
No.
Non-Israelite?
No.
So
there's some scriptures, there's some places in the Bible where they're interchangeable, you know. When the people came up to Christ and said, referring to Tyrian, said, and he built a synagogue for our nation. That same word nation could also have been translated to Gentile, but it wouldn't.
That's correct, actually. That's interesting.
It made sense that way, so they translated nation. But you find the same word, Gentile and nation, interchangeably used many, many times.
But when you look at
That's true. I don't know what point he's making here, but that appears to be accurate, factually accurate.
I believe you'll find there's no place, I could be mistaken on this, there's no place in the Bible where a person is called Gentile. No one is called, you are a Gentile. The word Gentile always plural to referring to nations. Why the nations? Because God told Abraham, you can become a multitude of nations. Not one little tiny nation over in Palestine, you'll be a multitude of nations in the earth. You can possess the gates of your enemies.
Yeah, and of course that's what Jews are waiting for, is to be able to take over the region or whatever, right? So he's using this as the basis to prove that he is the true Jew, when it could very easily be the case that they just haven't, the prophecy hasn't been fulfilled yet. This is wild, dude.
Any weapon that forms against you, he said, will not prosper.
when you look in the New Testament, Gentiles, right, plural, like you said, referring, if you read a Strong's Concordance numerous times in the Strong's Concordance in the Hebrew and Greek, referring to a people group, Gentiles would be considered non-Israelite, non-Jew. And so
not by Strong Concordance.
To say, yeah, multiple times in Strong's Concordance. I think it's like number G.
No. I think this guy is correct on there. I think the KKK leader is correct here, from what I can tell. Gentile is referring to nations of people, and Gentile, when used in a singular sense, is referring to a member of a nation.
I'll text it to you if you want. I'll text you where I see it in my Strongs, but numerous times.
Does this dude text? Does he know what a text message is? He looks like he's 83.
The word means nations. Now, somebody might interpret that, what that nation means, by some type of religious history, I guess, of where that's what they're taught. You go to seminary and say, well, that's what it means. And so, okay, that's what it means. But the word itself means nations. That's what it means.
Well, when I do like a simple word study of it in my Strongs, my Strong's Concordance would say non-Israelite, And so when I'm reading the scriptures and it's addressing not only Jews but Gentiles, I'm saying Jews would be considered, according to the context of the scripture, an Israelite, and the Gentiles would be a non-Israelite, right?
I think that's how most people use it, but in the most technical sense, in the Bible, that's not how it was originally intended to be used.
Okay? And so, yes, I believe the statement Jesus makes, going back to that first scripture you brought up, Jesus saying, I came to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Yes, I believe that was true, right? The same way Jesus was limited in his humanity. We believe he was 100% man and 100% God. Because he was limited to his humanity.
Wait, so he was 200% of something total? Is that what you're saying? I thought you could only be 100% of something.
That's why he submitted himself to the will of the Father. He prayed to the Father. That's why he couldn't be in Jerusalem and Bethlehem. He couldn't be in Jerusalem, and Austin, Texas at the same time, because he was limited in his humanity. But if we say Jesus only came and his sacrifice, his crucifixion, death, and resurrection on the cross was only for Israelites,
I've never heard this claim that Jesus was limited in his humanity. That's interesting.
I think we would be fooling ourselves in the macro narrative of Scripture to say God's not including all races, and again, that's not. I think that's a beautiful picture of God's love, showing that His sacrifice is on the table for all people. So in John 3, right, when he's talking to Nicodemus, the religious Pharisee, and he says, God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have ever.
This is so interesting, listening to people argue using the same verses that anti-Nazis used against the Nazis in the 1930s in Germany. I did so much research into this, is crazy. And listening to people actually use these verses to argue it is wild.
Everlasting life.
And you think that God breaks through the covenant to Israel?
Well, I think the question now becomes, who is Israel, right? And in your stance, you believe Israel is a literal ethnic group, and you are a part of that ethnic group as an Israelite. My perspective, which stems from my eschatology, right? I'm an amillennialist.
Eschatology means end times beliefs, and he's an amillennialist. Millennialist. See if I can find an answer to what the hell that is. An amillennialist. Amillennialism is a position on how to interpret the 1,000-year reign of Christ. Okay, mentioned in Revelation 20. Premillennialism, Christ will return before a literal 1,000-year kingdom on earth. This is the view behind rapture theology, left behind, etc. Postmillennialism, Christ will return after the church gradually Christianizes the world over a long period, the millennium being symbolic. Popular 19th century optimistic Protestantism. And amillennialism, the a prefix meaning no millennium. Not that there's no reign of Christ, but that the 1,000 years isn't a literal future period. Instead, it's symbolic of the current church age between Christ's resurrection and his eventual return. Interesting. Amillennialists believe the 1,000 years in Revelation is happening now symbolically. Christ reigns currently through the church and in heaven. Satan is bound in the sense of being restrained from fully deceiving the nations, not literally chained up somewhere. When Christ returns, it's straight to final judgment and the eternal state, no intermediate earthly kingdom. People who believe this is commonly believed among Lutherans and Calvinists, which is exactly the denominations that existed in Germany during the 30s. That's fascinating. It remains a dominant view in Catholic, Orthodox, and many mainline Protestant churches, as well as traditional Reformed denominations. Reformed churches being like the predecessor to Presbyterian, basically. Much of American evangelical Christianity apparently leans heavily premillennial, which again is the belief that Jesus will return before a literal 1,000-year kingdom on earth. It's the view behind rapture theology and stuff. Jehovah's Witnesses hold that view as well. Amillennialism tends to correlate with less apocalyptic, less Zionism-focused theology, apparently.
When it comes to eschatology, are you pre-trib or pre-trib?
I don't believe in the rapture.
Okay, so I'm an amillennialist. I don't believe in the rapture either. But I'm an amillennialist, right? So I would say that Israel is not just a literal ethnic group, but it would be children of God. And so when you read the book of Romans, right, I think you and I could...
That is so fascinating, dude. Oh my God, this is very interesting. I really appreciate the Antibot sending this to me. Also, Jehovah's Witnesses they don't believe in the rapture either. And the rapture is incorrect theology, actually. It was written in, you know what? I bet this guy is opposed to the writings of Paul, too, just like the Nazis were. If I had to guess, I would say he's opposed to Paul's writings. In fact, the Nazis cut out a lot of Paul's writings from the Bible completely.
Group, but it would be children of God. And so when you read the book of Romans, right, I think you and I could both agree Romans is a beautiful, compact epistle from Paul on what the ABCs of the gospel, right?
Could you agree on that? Is the question here. Because the Nazis rejected all of Paul's writings, and they actually slimmed down the Bible dramatically. They got rid of a bunch of books, Micah, a whole bunch of Old Testament stuff, and they kept the gospel accounts and some of the New Testament writings that were not written by Paul.
right? ABCs of theology. When I'm reading the book of Romans and, as it flows in one letter, not just the chapters with the headers and the whole letter, Paul is writing this thing telling believers that we've been justified by God, that we've been sanctified, that the law, he even talks about the law from Romans 6-9, where he's at first he's when you read the law, it can entice you to do the wrong thing, right? And then he says, well, is the law bad? No, the law is not bad. Mm-hmm. Well, now that you've been forgiven, does that mean that you abuse the law? Absolutely not. You don't abuse God's grace, right. And this and that. And now, from the Old Testament, the law is not above your head like a target you shoot at. The law is now in you, mm-hmm. in your heart, and the law manifests through your life. And so God's not breaking the covenant. He's fulfilling the covenant, and he's fulfilling the law. That's why he said, I did not come to abolish the law,
but to fulfill it. Yes.
That's
why I always say, in this context, when I say we don't eat shellfish or pork or whatever, or we're allowed to eat shellfish and pork and wear cotton and linen blends, I say it's because Jesus came to fulfill the law specifically, because Christians will get into a semantic argument with you if you say anything other than that.
To fulfill it, right? And I believe Jesus does fulfill that on the cross and that payment. Hebrews 10 talks about it as well. I think I just have a really hard time, respectfully, I have a really hard time wrapping my mind around that.
Well, let me tell you what. Revelation said Satan was going to deceive the whole world. How is he deceiving the world?
Okay. Revelation says Satan will deceive the world. How's he deceiving the world? By tricking you into thinking you're not a real Jew, right?
Through false doctrine. We see that in 2 Timothy. If you read 2 Timothy 3, right?
False doctrine, okay.
False doctrine, godlessness, sexual immorality.
Bro, you're listing my top favorite things, my favorite activities over here. Sexual immorality, godlessness. Yes, I'm all in. I just created a new website, firesidewatch.com. You can watch videos with friends, and everybody can play or pause the video. I made it so I could collaborate with other YouTubers, but I figured I might as well make it available to everybody. On top of that, you can add videos to the queue, upvote them, and sort by most upvoted. Give it a look, firesidewatch.com. And while you're at it, check out my Patreon, owenmorgan.com/Patreon. You can follow me there for free.
So what does this deception look like, though?
Well, that's the nasty thing about deception is you don't know you're being deceived when you're being deceived.
In fact, we read in 2 Thessalonians that God says, because they don't have a love for the truth, I'm going to send them a strong delusion. God is going to send strong delusion that they'll believe a lie.
So what do you think that lie is that people are believing?
Well, first off, strong deception.
Have I ever told you guys, I've mentioned this before, but when I lived in West Virginia, I got this thing thrown at my door, and it was thrown at the doors of everybody all up and down the block. And it was bags of rice with these little pamphlets in them, original Night Riders, Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. And they put the rice in the bags so that they can chuck them from the car and hit the door. So they go all the way up and down every street in the town. I lived in a sundown town, by the way. A black person comes in and they don't leave if they're there after dark, that kind of place. Anyway, they throw them at each door, and they have a front side and a back side. Front side, original Night Riders, Knights of Ku Klux Klan, national office. They even got a hotline. Join today for God, race, and nation. And on the back, this is what they cared about at the time. This is from 2016, March 2016. In 1996, the Islamization of America. In 1996, Bill Clinton became the first U.S. president to hold an Eid ul-Fitr dinner at the White House to celebrate the end of Ramadan, the Muslim month-long dawn-to-dusk fast. Eid al-Fitr includes 6, takbirs, the raising of hands and shouting Allahu Akbar to declare that Allah, the moon god, is the greatest. Well, Allah just means God, right? Doesn't Allah mean God? In 2014, Rocky Mountain High School in Fort Collins, Colorado, became the first high school to recite the Pledge of Allegiance in Arabic, replacing one nation under God with one nation under Allah. I looked all these up a long-ass time ago, and the bottom line is they're lying. Pretty much all of this is bullshit. It has a grain of truth to it. So Bill Clinton invited Muslims to the White House to, cultural exchange, blah, blah, blah. Donald Trump has too. Donald Trump, in fact, invited a terrorist on the FBI or on the CIA or whatever's most wanted list. the head of Syria, the new head of Syria. And regarding this Rocky Mountain High School thing, the high school held an event where they recited the pledge in a bunch of different languages, in French, in German, in Italian. And the point was to show that we're all like, you know, Americans or whatever. And one of the languages, one of the kids there spoke Arabic and was from the Middle East. So he recited the Pledge of Allegiance in his language. And how is God pronounced? And how is God pronounced in Arabic? Allah. So yes, they said Allah in the strictest sense, but it's completely made up nonsense. Department of Homeland Security, whose senior fellow, Mohammed Elibieri, recently declared the USA is an Islamic country. I mean, God, they're so full of shit. Everything that they say is bullshit. Rejecting Islam is not racism, it is patriotism. Allah is not God. The KKK is an absolutely wild organization, dude.
Coming from the rebellion of Satan, and the rebellion of Satan has his army, you might say, okay, and that army does not come. In other words, if Satan would come to you with horns on and red face and stuff, you would not be deceived by that, would you?
No, but that's not how he appears.
But it comes through as a born-again Christian who espouses the love of God, and yet violates the very birth covenant and the very covenant with the people he made. Then I can see where that could be a massive deception, especially when you interject fake Jews as being the true Jews. And
Jesus Christ, dude. This guy said he wanted to talk about the KKK before talking about his church. How could you possibly talk about them separately? The KKK has their own theology here.
And yet their lifestyle is horrible. Founded the pornography. The Jews are founded pornography.
Oh, give it a fucking rest, dude. Jews did not found pornography. They did not invent adult entertainment, okay? It's existed since the dawn of time, trust me. Since pictures were invented, since drawing was invented, we've had adult entertainment drawn on cave walls. Let me see if I can find the earliest example of adult entertainment, and maybe it'll be crude enough that I can show it on air. Erotic imagery is about as old as human art itself. It's prehistoric. 25,000 to 30,000 years ago, there were the Venus figurines. Some scholars interpret these exaggerated female forms as fertility objects, others as erotic. Let me see if I can find them. Oh, yes. No, I can't show this on air. This is an archaeological find. Maybe I should. Just Google it. No, I can't. It's too graphic. Yeah, it's too graphic. I can't show it. Way too graphic. Oh my God. The Venus figurines. Holy shit, dude. These are really graphic. Oh my God. Yes. Look these up if you want to see. This is the earliest erotic art. Post it in the chat. Just Google Venus figurines. Google image search. Venus figurines. They're pretty graphic. Were they fertility objects or erotic? They were definitely erotic. I don't know if they were fertility as well, but they were for sure absolutely erotic art. Jesus. That's nuts, dude. The Jews invented adult entertainment? Please.
They control the Hollywood, they control the media, and they just...
No, they don't. They don't control Hollywood, they don't control media. Give it a fucking rest, man.
That big book. Yeah. This is from 1928, okay. And this is Century Magazine. Have you ever heard of Century Magazine?
Yep, I've heard of Century.
Okay, it's very popular back in the a century ago. Okay, this appeared in a January edition of Century Magazine, and it kind of shows what I think we're facing here as a people, as a white Christian people, whose faith has been attacked and demonized by forces that is one thing to recognize Jesus Christ, but also we have to recognize what are the forces against him trying to destroy the faith of the fathers. Okay, this is from Rule Case Against the Jews. This is written by a rabbi. He says, you make much noise, as I'm doing right now, in fury about the undue Jewish influence in your theaters. I just got done saying the Jews control Hollywood. And movie palaces, very good. Granted, your complaint is well-founded. But what is that compared to our staggering influence in your churches, in your schools, in your laws?
Okay, so this guy found some random f***ing asshole who claims to be a rabbi, apparently, and is also claiming that Jews control the media and the churches and the everything else. Am I reading this correctly?
And in your government, and the very thoughts you think every day. You have not begun to appreciate the real depth of our guilt. We are intruders, we are disturbers, we are subverters.
Yeah, I bet that some Jewish rabbi, absolutely, he wrote this, right? 100%. I believe it.
We have taken your natural world, your ideals, your destiny, and played havoc with them. We have been at the bottom of not merely the latest great war, but nearly all your wars, not only of the Russian, but of every other major revolution in your history. He says over here, who knows what great and glorious destiny might have been yours if we had left you alone. But we did not leave you alone. And this is what we're facing today in our country. Our very nation, in Europe, will be invaded.
I would love to know who that was exactly. One more time.
Is staggering influence. This is Jews. This is written by a rabbi. You have to recognize what are the forces against him trying to destroy the faith of the fathers. Okay, this is from Real Case Against the Jews. This is written by
The Real Case Against the Jews. Let me see if I can find some info on this here. Give me just a second. Famous anti-Semitic hoax/misrepresentation. The actual source, it's from an article called A Real Case Against the Jews, sometimes cited as The Real Case Against the Jews, published in the Century magazine in 1928, written by Marcus Eli Ravage, who was a Jewish Romanian-American journalist and author. What it actually was, the article was satire. Ravage was mocking anti-Semitic conspiracy theories by sarcastically confessing to all the things anti-Semites accused Jews of. Yes, we gave you Christianity and communism. Yes, we undermined your pagan traditions, etc. It was written in an ironic, exaggerated voice meant to highlight the absurdity of anti-Semitic claims by taking them to their logical extreme. So that's what this was. Now let's just step back and listen just a little bit more here.
Not begun to appreciate the real depth of our guilt. We are intruders, we are disturbers, we are subverters. We have taken your natural world, your ideals, your destiny, and played havoc with them.
This is satire, not a confession. If it's safe enough for high school textbooks, it's safe enough for teaching about on YouTube and Twitch. That's true. All right, I'll show it. I'll show the Venus. What was it? The Venus. Hold on. Wait 1 second. They were the Venus. All right, I'm not going to zoom in on them or anything, but this is like high school level stuff. It's just like sculptures of women, basically, is what it is. Sculptures of women. There you go. And if you zoom in pretty far, you can see even more detail in these. They were very detailed.
We have been at the bottom, not merely the latest great war, but nearly all your wars, not only of the Russian, but of every other major revolution in your history. He says over here, who knows what great and glorious destiny might have been yours if we had left you alone. But we did not leave you alone. And this is what we're facing today in our country. Our very nation, in Europe, will be invaded by Muslims. If I was a black man, I could stand here and say, I'm proud of being black. And nobody would be offended by it.
Yeah, okay, let's think about that for a minute. Let's talk about that. Why is it okay to have pride in being, or to be proud of being black? What does black pride mean exactly? In our culture, black pride means you recognize, or other people recognize, the struggles and difficulty that you have experienced as a black person, disproportionate to the struggles that a white person faces. What does gay pride mean? It means you're proud of being who you are. You're proud of being gay. You're okay with who you are as a person, and you should be okay with that. What does white pride stand for? White pride has historically been used to demean, denigrate, and hurt minority communities. You can have German pride, you can have Irish pride, you can have English pride, if you British pride, whatever the fuck you want. You can have any type of pride you want, but white pride is associated with something very specific. Hating black people. Now, if you want to be known for that, which he does, then fine. You can be known for hating black people. But that's what that communicates to me when you say you have white pride. Communicates to me that you are a racist fuck.
Nobody would be mad about it. Am I right? If I can say I'm Jewish, nobody would be upset about it. But we have a guy over here, he cannot tell what he does for a living because his job would be in jeopardy. Why? Because he's proud of being a white. I know scores of people.
White is a nonsensical designation. Okay, black people are separated into a category in the first place because white people separated them into that category. This is like if blonde-haired people oppressed dark-haired people, and now these dark-haired people are saying, I have pride in having dark hair. I'm proud of the dark hair that I have. And the blonde-haired people are upset that people say that's fucked up when you say, I'm proud of having blonde hair. I'm a proud blondist or whatever. I mean, really think about this. He can't possibly not know what he's doing, right?
Who, if they just say
British pride, screw dentists and flavor. Yeah, right. Oh, sick burn on the British over there.
Probably, I've had reporters say, well, now there are black journalists associations, the black firemen association, the black lawyer association. Now you're a journalist. You belong to the white association? Well, no, there is no such.
I mean, does he really not understand, or is he being a shithead? Does he really not understand why white pride has bad connotations to it when black pride doesn't? Does he not understand that?
thing. I said, why not? Well, I guess there isn't one. I said, why do you go back and start one? Well, they're afraid. Because if you're proud of being white, you're going to be demonized and hated. Because there's more anti-white.
Please, white people are not demonized and hated. Give it a fucking rest. By the way, peak of humanity right here on the right. Am I right? This guy is the prime example of masculinity, peak masculinity over here. This is the best humanity has to offer in his eyes.
More anti-white propaganda, hatred out there than so-called anti-Semitism.
But do you think that
so-called anti-Semitism? That's interesting. I'll give you this. The country of Israel right now is completely off the rails and are claiming that everything is anti-Semitism even when it isn't, which is damaging the word and the movement and the positions and everything else. And I think Israel is fucking psychotic. But to say anti-Semitism doesn't exist, what the fuck is going through this dude's head? Seriously, this is insane.
Out there than so-called anti-Semitism.
But do you think that justifies you? Well, hold on. I don't want to say anything that I haven't heard you say yet. I know you said that you don't believe that black people are made in the image of God. Do you believe that Asian people are made in the image of God?
It depends what you mean by the image of God. I mean, people walk around like hands, eyes, nose. Yeah, I mean, they're
okay. Let me rephrase.
Monkeys, the eyes.
Are they Adamic? You know what he means. You know what he means. Were they children of Adam?
No, you could almost say they're made in the image of God. So no,
Well, we know.
But I'm talking about the spirit. The spirit is not in the image of God.
He's saying Asians are also pre-Adamic. They're pre-Adam.
We know that obviously animals don't have the image of God. Let me rephrase the question. Do you believe that black people can go to heaven?
Well,
holy shit, dude. That's crazy. First off, that's no, right? That the answer to that is no. If he didn't just come out and say yes, they can make it to heaven. That's fucking wild, dude. Oh my God. I got to grab this one.
Okay, let me rephrase.
Monkeys, the eyes, nose. You could almost say they're made in the image of God. So no, first off, the only one you get in eternal life, those who give their life to the Lord. So nobody goes to heaven because they have a certain color. So say white people don't go to heaven if they don't have a relationship with the Lord.
Right.
So you can't say black people don't go to heaven. Do white people go to heaven? No, white people don't go to heaven either. It has that relationship with the Lord. Now, do black people can have that same relationship with the Lord? I don't believe so.
Okay, so the answer is no. That was a roundabout way of saying no. He said he doesn't really believe in heaven exactly the way that everyone else seems to. But the real question is, can they have the same relationship with Jesus as white people? The answer is no, they can't. That is fucking wild, dude. Monkey? Did he say monkey? Yes, he did, actually. Although I think I kind of maybe misunderstood what he was saying. I think he was saying, are monkeys made in the image of God? So yeah, he kind of compared black people to monkeys just now. Yes, if that was your question. That shit is wild, dude. Oh my God. And they're just like casually having a conversation about this. This is absolutely unacceptable, dude.
So they can have a relationship, but it's the same relationship. All through the Bible, okay, God always refers to himself over 200 times, referred to the mighty God of Israel, the Father of Israel, so forth. not a single time where non-Israelites, he referred to himself as a father as their father. Every time it's only of Israel.
So if you don't think that they can have the same relationship with God that you have, then that would imply that they don't go to heaven, right?
If you're saying that, I'm not saying that. I don't know.
Well, I feel like that's what you're implying. I'm just asking.
That is obviously what he said. They cannot have the same relationship with God as white people. He can pretend all he wants that that's not what he says or what he feels or believes or whatever, but it's bullshit. And everybody knows it's bullshit.
Out of curiosity.
I don't know. I don't, because the Bible, God, he came to Israel. He came to Israel. He said in Genesis 1, he shall save his people from their sins. In that scripture I started read here a little bit ago. Here, Apostle Paul in Romans 9. Here, he says, he's saying, truth in Christ, I not my conscience will bearing witness in the Holy Ghost that I have great heaviness, and continual sorrow in my heart. For I could wish that I myself were accursed of Christ for my brethren. So he's talking about he's being racial there. My kinsmen.
He's being racial by saying my brethren. Again, race is not real. Race is an old 1730s construct that doesn't exist in reality. Race is fake.
According to the flesh, who are Israelites? The Apostle Paul. Now, what do these Israelites have? He's to two Israelites who have the adoption, they have the glory, they have the covenant, and the giving of the law, the service of God, and the promises. These are the things that God says, or Paul says, Israel has. So if that's the case, then why is he selected that? If everybody has those things, then why does he have to say they have those things?
Well, if you continue to read Romans 9, then Paul begins to make an appeal about Israel's unbelief, and then he talks about the Gentiles and how the Gentiles can receive. But the Gentiles, again, according to the Strong's Concordance, I'll be more than happy to throw it when the video comes out. Throw it up.
I think KKK guy is correct on this one. Actually, I mean, I don't have any agenda here except for the truth, and the truth is that black and white people are not different in any way, shape, or form except for the color of their skin, pretty much exclusively. There's no intelligence difference. There's no quote-unquote soul difference. None of that shit. But this thing about Gentiles specifically, I believe that the KKK dude is correct on the definition of the word Gentile.
Up on the screen and send it to you as well, talking about non-Israelites in reference to Gentiles. These non-Israelites are allowed to have faith because of the righteousness of God, right standing with God. And then he talks about that, and then he goes into this remnant of Israel. And then furthermore, when you go down in Romans 10, I think it's Romans 10, I could be misquoting it, but somewhere after this Romans 9 passage, he begins to talk about blessed are the feet of those who preach the good news, right? Meaning that that the reason that people are going to come to faith is because that's duty as believers, right? We got to preach the word of God. Right. Now, when I also read Revelation, just going off what we just chatted about when I asked you, do you believe black people go to heaven? And what you didn't directly say that, but what you were implying was they can't have the same relationship with God that you have.
Right, exactly. That's what he said. He said that. That's not an implication. Those are the words that he used.
Therefore, according to that belief, they wouldn't be in heaven. But in Revelation, it says that every nation, tribe, and tongue will be represented in heaven. And so, if that's every nation,
you're trying to, in my mind, you're trying to make nations apply to everybody on the earth. And God tells Israel, to Abraham, you can be a multitude. And there's a lot of prejudice. I mean, the Judaizers there, the Apostle Paul fought against the Judaizers because Paul was going to the Gentiles, the nations, and the Judaizers said, well, they got to come if they're going to come to faith. They got to start obeying all the ceremonial laws and so forth. They got to be circumcised. They got to be, all this sort of stuff. And
Paul said that you cannot be circumcised. That's what he specifically said, Galatians 5. He was forming out the early church, and he was listing out the rules that you had to follow. And basically, he wanted to separate Christianity from Judaism. So he said, if you are circumcised, you must follow the whole law, all 613 commandments, not eating shellfish or pork or wearing cotton and linen blends or any of that shit. You cannot live life as a Christian. You have to live life as a Jew if you get circumcised. So I'm not sure what he's referring to here. Does he think that you have to be circumcised to be Christian? That's not true. That's the exact opposite of the case.
Laws and so forth. They got to be circumcised. They got to be, all this sort of stuff.
That is literally exactly the opposite of what Paul said.
And Paul said, no, they're all the same. That's what he's saying. They're all the same. We have the same situation in a way in this country. You have people, especially years ago, people from the South that say, I don't trust them Yankees. No, Yankees are no good. You know, so you had this prejudice between South and the North. The Yankees were no good. The Yankees about the South were no good. The English hates the Irish. The Irish hates the English, and the Germans hate the British, especially World War I, and because of industrial complex. And British hated the Germans, and the Poles hated the German. And Paul said, hey, we're all one people.
Yes, exactly. That's correct. Okay. So how did you arrive at your special and black people cannot have the same relationship with God that you can? How did you arrive there?
We're all one people. And that's what he's saying. All these nations are one. We're all the descendants of Abraham. We're all one people. And God told Abraham, you can make more multitude. Did God lie when he said that? Of course not. There will be a multitude of nations. Not just one little nation over in Palestine, but a multitude of nations. And he fulfilled that covenant. And Hebrews 6 says, how do we have faith in the Lord? How do we have faith in our salvation? If you read Hebrews 6 all the way through, the reason you can have faith in your salvation with a steadfast and sure is because God kept the covenant to Abraham.
Yes, but then that's where I would say again, like I said earlier in the Romans, who has been given the right to become children of Abraham?
You're injecting diversity into it. You're trying to make a multiracial church.
Well, I believe that
I don't understand what this guy is arguing. Am I missing it? Maybe I'll understand this better when I do the edits, but this doesn't seem to make any sense. It sounds like the KKK dude is arguing that everybody will be able to come to Jesus.
God is all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-loving. I think you would agree. And if God created time and space, that means God exists outside of time and space, which means God right now, in this moment, sees your birth and your death at the same time, because he exists outside of time and space. So if God exists outside of time and space, I think my God is so big that he's thinking about every nation. When you hear the word every nation, what else could that imply? Because words have definitions, and when you say every nation, that would...
And that's where the great deception comes in.
But that's the word of God. Would you say the Bible is infallible?
Well, right, with all due respect, that's the interpretation you're given. I don't see it that. What I see when God said that he made this covenant with Abraham, it's an everlasting covenant. It doesn't change. And he said, along the sun and the moon, the stars in the heavens.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, part of the Christian belief is to believe that is to believe that God backed out of his agreement with the Jews and formed a new covenant, right? So yeah, I get that doesn't really make any sense. That's very interesting.